How does a 100,000-ton aircraft carrier stop at sea? A 100,000-ton steel warship, longer than the Eiffel Tower laid flat, powered by 2 nuclear reactors carrying 5,000 people and 90 warplanes, is hurtling through the ocean at 35 miles per hour. And right now, someone has just fallen overboard. And this machine, the single most expensive and lethal weapon ever built by mankind, has to stop. In the middle of the open sea, with no brakes, no runway, no margin for error. How does it do it? And what happens when it can't? Stay until the end, because the worst-case scenario has already happened. This machine stretches 1,106 feet from bow to stern and displaces more than 100,000 tons of water, making it, without argument, the largest warship ever constructed. Yes, we are talking about the USS Gerald R. Ford. It arrives, and the moment it does, every government within 1,000 miles takes notice. Prime ministers are briefed, generals are woken up, emergency calls are placed, and why wouldn't they be? That number, 100,000 tons, means almost nothing until you frame it correctly. It is roughly equivalent to the mass of 10,000 to 15,000 adult African elephants. All of them, moving together at 35 miles per hour through the open ocean, and it never stops. It moves through the sea like a massive shadow whose precise location is known only to naval commanders. Gerald is capable of exceeding 30 knots, roughly 56 kilometers per hour, an almost unimaginable engineering achievement for a vessel of this weight costing around $37 billion. Unfortunately, there is a problem. It can't stop. How do you stop something this massive? A ship, unlike an automobile, a train, or an aircraft, does not have brakes. The USS John F. Kennedy, a carrier of comparable size, took approximately 6 miles to stop from 30 knots to a complete drifting halt. 6 miles. That is the full length of Manhattan Island, needed just to coast to a stop. Not an emergency turn, just stopping. But why? Why would the most powerful war machine ever built by human hands need to halt dead in open water? The answer is more terrifying than you could ever imagine. 3 reasons, and each one is more critical than the last. First, man overboard. Every single year, sailors fall into the ocean during active operations. The US Navy logs dozens of man overboard incidents annually. At 30 knots, if the ship doesn't reverse and halt fast enough, a human body in 60 degrees Fahrenheit water has less than 6 hours before hypothermia sets in. But realistically, they drown in minutes. Every second counts. Every knot counts. Second, emergency replenishment at sea. Aircraft carriers burn staggering amounts of fuel for their escort ships, aircraft, and onboard systems, up to 100,000 gallons per day for a carrier strike group. But nuclear-powered carriers like the USS Gerald R. Ford don't just stop for fuel. They stop for food, ammunition, spare parts, and personnel. The carrier must reduce speed to near zero for safe line transfer operations between ships. Third, medical emergencies and casualties. Think of a sailor mid-surgery in the ship's medical bay, a procedure that requires zero hull vibration, or a helicopter attempting a nighttime medical evacuation in rough seas. The ship must stabilize, it must stop. Fourth, engine failure and battle damage. In combat scenarios, a carrier may take a torpedo hit or suffer catastrophic mechanical failure, forcing an uncontrolled deceleration under the worst possible conditions. This machine doesn't get to choose when it stops. Physics, war, and human survival choose it. But when 100,000 tons of steel moving at full speed needs to stop, what on earth does the physics of that actually look like? We all know that force equals mass times acceleration, and when your mass is 100,000 metric tons, the force required to decelerate you is almost incomprehensible. A fully loaded USS Gerald R. Ford class carrier carries roughly the kinetic energy of a small meteor. You cannot just hit the brakes, because aircraft carriers don't have brakes. What they have is far more violent and fascinating. The entire stopping mechanism relies on reverse thrust from massive propeller shafts. The Ford class uses 4 massive bronze propellers, each 21 feet in diameter and weighing 66,200 pounds each. To stop, these propellers are spun into full reverse, fighting their own forward momentum. The turbines that power them generate 260,000 shaft horsepower. When thrown into reverse at full load, the vibration alone is violent enough to rattle the ship's superstructure. The result? At full speed of 30+ knots, a Nimitz-class carrier requires approximately 3 nautical miles, nearly 5.5 kilometers, to come to a complete stop. 3 miles. The deceleration timeline stretches beyond 12 minutes at a minimum. If that blew your mind, smash like, because the physics coming up is somehow even more insane. Add to this the role of the ship's rudders, twin rudders each the size of a house, which are used to create drag and help steer the decelerating ship. Without rudder control during braking, the carrier becomes a ballistic object. Then there's the matter of cavitation. When propellers reverse at high speed, they create enormous pressure voids in the water. These imploding bubbles release shockwaves powerful enough to physically damage the propeller blades. It's controlled destruction. Engineers design it this way so that no civilian ship could survive. In absolute emergencies, everything reverses at once. It's called an all-stop, all-back full, and the stress placed on the ship's keel, engines, and crew is immense. But what happens when the crew is too late, too slow, or when the carrier simply cannot stop in time? This is where it stops being physics and starts being a catastrophe. Scenario 1. Collision. A carrier traveling at even 15 knots that fails to stop becomes an unstoppable battering ram. In January 2017, the USS Lake Champlain, a guided missile cruiser operating near a carrier strike group, collided with a South Korean fishing vessel. That was a cruiser weighing 9,600 tons. A carrier at full momentum hitting another vessel would be a maritime extinction event. The cargo ship, submarine, or friendly frigate it strikes would simply cease to exist. Scenario 2. Runway of death. Aircraft carriers are floating airstrips. If a carrier cannot decelerate and stabilize during a man overboard or emergency aircraft landing, the consequences cascade. In 2016, an FA-18 crash-landed on USS Eisenhower during rough seas. The ship's deceleration management was critical to preventing the aircraft from sliding off the deck. A moving, unstabilized carrier means a $70 million aircraft and its pilot going into the sea. Boom. End. Nothing scenario. 3. RAS catastrophe. The replenishment at sea requires 2 ships traveling at matched speed within 100 to 200 feet of each other. If a carrier fails to control its deceleration during RS and closes that distance, our 100,000-ton object will slam into a fuel tanker carrying millions of gallons of aviation fuel. The USS Kalamazoo Enterprise collision in 1969 during RAS operations resulted in catastrophic fires and casualties, and that was before modern carrier displacement. Scenario 4. Grounding. While rare in the open ocean, carriers operating near coastlines, straits, or shallow waters that fail to stop face-running aground. The wreck of the Argentine cruiser ARA, General Belgrano, destroyed in 1982 and sunk in minutes, showed the world what happens when a warship loses propulsion and control. 323 men died. A carrier grounding, by comparison, would strand 5,000 lives in hostile waters. The Navy knows all of this. That's why stopping drills are rehearsed obsessively. That's why bridge resource management trains for thousands of hours. Because on the open ocean, there are no guardrails, no emergency exits, and absolutely no second chances. 3 miles of ocean. 12 minutes of controlled chaos, propellers spinning in reverse with enough force to shake the ship apart. And if it fails? History has already shown us what happens, and the death toll speaks for itself. Drop a comment below. Tell me, what do you think is harder, stopping a carrier or landing a jet on one at night?